I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it. The door slammed shut behind me, rattling the family photos hanging on the wall. Photos that I realized no longer included me. I stood alone in the parking lot of Morton and Sons Manufacturing, the company my grandfather had founded, holding a cardboard box that contained 15 years of my life. And don't even think about stealing our clients. My brother Jake's voice echoed as I walked away. We've already informed everyone about your termination. I allow myself a small smirk as I place the box into my Tesla, the car that had sparked the confrontation earlier that day. How can you afford that? Dad had asked in this morning's board meeting. Where's all this money coming from? What followed were accusations of embezzlement, suggestions that I've been taking from the family business, and ultimately, my public firing. None of them bothered to check that I had bought the car with my own money. Money had earned from the tech company I quietly built over the last decade. A text from Jake buzzed through. Return your key card. All access revoked. I replied, already done. Good luck with the Anderson contract next week. 3 dots appeared as he typed. Then we don't need luck or you. If only they knew. The Anderson Group was our largest client, generating over $50 million in annual revenue. They thought the contract renewal next week was just another routine meeting. What they didn't know was that the Anderson Group had been acquired 6 months ago, and the new owner was Phoenix Innovations, my company. I'd started Phoenix 10 years ago using the engineering degree my family had scoffed at as wasted time. They never thought I'd need it. After all, I was supposed to just work in the family business. What's the point of college? Dad had asked. You'll inherit a share anyway. That share had gotten smaller every year as Jake's grew larger. He was the one who had committed to the family business, who had no interest in modernizing or embracing new ideas. Another message buzzed, this time from my assistant at Phoenix. Mr. Taylor, the Anderson Group paperwork is complete. You're officially listed as CEO. Should we proceed with Monday's meeting as planned? Yes, I responded. But first, send me everything on Morton and Sons financials, especially how dependent they are on the Anderson contract. I drove home to my penthouse apartment, which had also raised suspicions. How could someone with a middle manager's salary afford such luxury? They never bothered to ask about my other ventures, too convinced of their superiority. The irony was I planned to help them. The Anderson acquisition was supposed to be leverage, a way to convince them to modernize and listen to my ideas, but they had gone straight to accusations and ultimatums. More text messages flooded in from my family. Mom, how could you steal from us after all we've done for you? Jake, don't even think about unemployment. We'll fight it. Dad, you're dead to us. Dead. I forwarded each message to my lawyer, then ordered dinner and began reviewing the documents my assistant had sent. The numbers were telling. Without the Anderson contract, Morton and Sons would lose 60% of their revenue. They'd survive, but just barely. Another text arrived, this time from my sister-in-law, Lily. Jake's throwing a party to celebrate getting rid of you. Says now the company can be run properly, whatever that means. Lily had always been the outlier of the family, married to Jake, but never fully embracing the Morton family mentality. Thanks for the info, I texted back. You might want to suggest you hold off on celebrating. What are you planning? She asked. Let's just say Monday's board meeting will be interesting. I spent the weekend preparing, reviewing contracts, and ignoring increasingly hostile messages from my family. They convinced themselves I had been plotting against them for years, which in a way I had, but not in a way they imagined. Monday morning, I dressed in a designer suit I'd never worn to Morton and Sons. It would have raised too many questions. My regular parking spot was blocked with a handwritten sign that read, "Reserved for loyal employees only." I parked in a visitor spot instead. The security guard who had known me for 15 years wouldn't meet my eyes when he asked for ID. I'm here for the Anderson Group meeting, I said calmly, showing him my Phoenix Innovations CEO badge. His eyes widened as he saw it. I need to call upstairs. Of course, I replied. I waited in the lobby, watching familiar faces hurry past, all pretending to be busy. News on my firing had spread fast. Jake showed up, swaggering down the hallway. You're not welcome here. The Anderson meeting isn't until... He froze when he saw my visitor badge. Then he read it again. This is a joke. Phoenix Innovations. I said, making sure everyone in the lobby heard me. Parent company of the Anderson Group. Shall we head to the boardroom? I believe everyone's waiting. The color drained from his face. You're lying. This is some kind of trick. Want to call Anderson's office to verify, or should we go up and I'll explain everything at once? The elevator ride was silent. Jake stared at me like I was a stranger. In a way, I was. He had never seen me as anything but the family screw-up. The sibling who wanted more than what was handed to her. The boardroom was quiet when we entered. Dad stood at the head of the table, then nearly collapsed into his chair when he saw me. What is she doing here, he asked. I walked to the front of the room, setting my briefcase on the table. Good morning, everyone. I'm here on behalf of Phoenix Innovations, the parent company of the Anderson Group. We need to discuss the contract renewal. The room was dead silent. I could almost hear them doing the math, realizing I controlled their biggest client. This is impossible, Dad finally stammered. You can't. You don't own a successful tech company, run multiple businesses, be your boss's boss. I smiled. Would you like to see the paperwork? I handed out folders to everyone at the table, savoring the silence. Each folder contained detailed documentation of Phoenix Innovations' acquisition of Anderson Group, along with my full business history. This is a trick, Jay insisted, his voice trembling. You're just trying to get back at us for firing you. Actually, I said, opening my own folder, I've owned Anderson Group for 6 months. Your firing last Friday was poor timing. I finally found his voice. 6 months, but they've been our client for 20 years. Yes, and in those 20 years, what innovations have you offered them? What improvements have you made? While you've relied on Grandpa's legacy, your competitors have modernized. The only reason Anderson stayed was loyalty and price points that barely covered your costs. The board members started flipping through their folders, murmuring to each other. I noticed several shooting glances at Dad and Jake. That's why you bought the Tesla, Jake blurted out. The apartment, the clothes, we thought. You thought I was stealing, I finished. Because in your world, a woman, especially your little sibling, couldn't possibly build something successful on her own. Now wait a minute. Dad stood up, his face turning red. You worked here. Everything you learned, I went from college. I cut him off. From my engineering degree, the one you mocked. From my business courses, the ones you said were a waste of time. While you were busy protecting the way we've always done things, I was building a company that actually works in the modern world. Lily, who had been quietly observing, suddenly laughed. That's why you never argued when they passed you over for promotions. You were already running something bigger. I winked at her. She'd always been the sharpest one in the family. The Anderson contract expires next week. I continued all business now. Phoenix Innovations has thoroughly reviewed all potential manufacturers. You're no longer competitive. Dad's face drained of color. You wouldn't I? I raised an eyebrow. You called me a thief on Friday. You said I was dead to you. Why should I keep an outdated, overpriced manufacturer just because my father runs it? Jake jumped to his feet. This is blackmail, I said calmly. This is business. The same just business you cited when you took credit for my process improvements last year when you gave yourself a bonus for my cost-saving measures. I smiled. I'm simply making a smart business decision. One of the board members cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Taylor? Mr. Taylor, I corrected calmly, the hint of a smile on my lips. I use my mother's maiden name professionally. I pulled another document from my briefcase, letting it rest on the table for everyone to see. I'm proposing a full-scale modernization of Morton & Sons, new equipment, updated processes, proper digital integration. Phoenix Innovations is prepared to fund all the improvements in exchange for a controlling interest in the company. You want to take over? Dad's voice was barely a whisper, a mix of disbelief and fear. I want to save Grandfather's legacy, I replied coolly. The way things are going, you're 3 bad quarters away from bankruptcy. The Anderson contract is all that's keeping you afloat, and you won't keep it without my help. The room was shifting. The board members, once loyal to Dad, were starting to see the numbers. They knew I was right. Jake's voice broke the tension. If you think we'll just hand over the company, his tone was low, a warning. I interrupted, not giving him a chance to finish. Then what? Fire me again? Cut me out of the family photos once more? Tell me how disappointed you are? Again, I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. I'm offering you a chance to save the company. It's your choice whether you take it. The next hour was a blur. The board had questions, valid ones, about the cost of modernization, the timeline for implementation, and employee retention. I had answers for everything. Meanwhile, Dad and Jake sat in stunned silence as their allies slowly but surely turned to my side. We'll need to vote, the board chairman finally said, his voice the first sign of resolve in the room. Of course, I said, standing and gathering my things. You have until Friday. After that, Phoenix will pursue other manufacturing partners. I was almost to the door when Dad's voice stopped me. Why didn't you tell us about your company, about Phoenix? I turned slowly, looking at the man who had once been my everything. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. You didn't think I could handle a management role here, let alone run a successful company. Would you have listened to me back then? Dad opened his mouth, but the words died on his lips. I could see him remembering the times he dismissed my ideas. Exactly. I opened the door but paused. Lily has my number if you need to reach me. It's the same one I've had for 15 years, although I know you deleted it from your phones after Friday. The next few days unfolded like a carefully planned chess game. Board members called seeking clarification, each one ending the conversation with unofficial assurances of support. Lily kept me updated on the family drama. Dad was having what she called a complete existential crisis about how he treated me, while Jake was torn between rage and a deep sense of loss. Then Wednesday night, my mother showed up at my apartment. I always wondered, she said softly as I poured her tea about the apartment, the car. I thought maybe you had a rich boyfriend you were keeping secret. Would that have been better? I asked, tilting my head. If a man was behind my success, she shifted uncomfortably, the realization hitting her. We really messed up, didn't we? Yes, I replied simply, letting the silence hang in the air. You did. Can you forgive us? She asked, voice tinged with uncertainty. I stirred my tea slowly, considering the question. That depends. Are you asking for forgiveness because you're genuinely sorry, or because I turned out to be successful? She didn't have an answer, but I could see her shame. Friday's board meeting went quickly. The vote was unanimous. Almost. Jake stormed out halfway through. Dad abstained, his face pale as he stared at the table, while his company changed hands. The transition was slow but deliberate. I brought in Phoenix's experts to modernize the facilities, retrained employees who were willing to adapt, and replace those who couldn't. Dad retired officially to spend time with family, but it was clear he couldn't handle working under me. Jake stuck around, though, gradually coming to terms with a new role in sales where his people skills could shine without his ego getting in the way. 1 year after my dramatic firing, I sat in my father's old office, now mine. The family photos on the wall were new, showing the entire family, including me. Lily had insisted on a professional family photo shoot once the dust had settled. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad, having family dinner tonight. Your favorite lasagna coming. I smiled, thinking back to a year ago when I had received angry, accusatory messages about betrayal and theft. We weren't fully healed yet, but we were on the path. On my way, I typed back, should I bring the Tesla, or will that trigger another crisis? Bring it, Dad texted back quickly. Jake's thinking about buying one. Don't tell him I told you. I laughed as I picked up my keys. The old dad would have forbidden Jake from buying a wasteful status symbol, but the new dad, well, he was learning. As I drove to my parents' house, I thought about how things might have turned out if they had supported me, my education, and my ideas from the start. We could have modernized years ago, could have grown together instead of apart. But maybe this was better. Maybe we all needed to learn these lessons the hard way. The company was thriving now, a perfect blend of Morton's legacy and Phoenix innovation. The family was healing, slowly learning to appreciate each member's unique strengths. Even Jake had stopped introducing me as his little sibling and started calling me our CEO with a mixture of pride and disbelief. As for the Anderson contract, we didn't need it anymore. Once you're willing to innovate and embrace new ideas, success just happens. I parked my Tesla in the driveway next to Jake's new one, matching mine in color. I couldn't help but smile. Some things never change. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Your brother wants to talk to you about some ideas he has for the sales department, she said, giving me a hug. Try not to look too smug when he admits your customer relationship software was right all along. I hugged her back, the smell of her lasagna filling the air. Don't worry, I grinned. I learned from the best about being gracious in victory. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, who taught you that? Nobody, I said with a wink. That's why I'm going to enjoy this so much. Her laughter followed me into the house where my family waited, imperfect, but finally starting to see me for who I really was. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about giving them the chance to become your allies.